Hey there, this is Natalie, and we've already had the news that Tappei is actually going to be releasing another 2 chapters today, so I really better get on with making this one about chapter 81. I was going to do it last night, but it actually ended up taking me so long to edit and render the one for chapter 80 that I needed to go to bed. And so I'm going to quickly go through the Google Translate for chapter 81 for you, and so we can see what happened there before we get into the brand new chapters that are coming out today. Now, chapter 81 is quite a short chapter, and it really mainly focuses on 2 things. Emilia's encounter with Volcanica, and what's going on in Julius's fight with Reid Astrea. First, we see that Emilia's comparing the test of having to confront Volcanica, where she doesn't know what she has to do because Volcanica just keeps repeating the same line and seems to have succumbed to dragon dementia. She compares this to the trial against Reid Astrea and says that it practically seems cute compared to what she's facing now. It says here, like Reid, the test in which the dead revived in the state at that time was also a difficult task, but when I think about it now, it seems to be much more cute. It was a joke that Reid, that violent person, seemed cute, but Reid was able to talk and told me what to do. Volcanica is not doing that. For Emilia, who had to break through more exams, it was the worst thing that the questioners were out of focus. And it says, I have to bring good news back to Subaru as soon as possible. Basically, she knows that she has a limited time to kind of figure out what she has to do here and to get past it so she can rewrite the rules of the tower. And everybody else is engaged in other battles at the moment. She needs to get this done while everybody else is still alive and fighting. She doesn't know what to do. She says, I don't think I should beat Volcanica like Reid, who this Google Translate is still referring to as a raid. So she thinks about the different trials that there have been in the tower. She thinks about how the Taigeta exam, which was for the library, that they accessed using Subaru's knowledge of our world, which she refers to here as Subaru's knowledge of the waterfall. As we saw earlier in the arc, people in the ReZero world consider Subaru's isekai to mean a place beyond the waterfall. The ReZero world is flat and it's rimmed by these great cascades, and they basically believe that there are other worlds on the other side and people occasionally come through from them. Subaru's very specific knowledge, which, it's hinted is similar to Flugel's knowledge, who created the trial for as yet undisclosed but very suspicious reasons, such as them being the same person or something like that. This has got to be a difficult thought for Emilia, because if she doesn't have what it takes to pass this test through no fault of her own, if it is something like that where only someone with very specific knowledge or abilities could do it, she is going to be basically letting everybody down in her eyes, because she's been tasked with dealing with this tower and rewriting the rules to save everybody. Reid Astrea was an obstacle in the double layer, I think it means second layer, Electra test. Even so, Emilia managed to win because she managed to get rid of Reid's head, but some say she succeeded because it was her first challenge. I mean, she didn't get rid of his head by decapitating him or anything. She got in his head and got him to agree to conditions to the trial. That enabled her to win. Of course, it wasn't Emilia's first challenge. She did defeat all 3 of the trials in the sanctuary. So she must be getting pretty sick of trials by now. Now, Volcanica just repeats the same line that he was saying in the last chapter and the one before that. She mentions that in the other examination rooms there was a black stone board that Subaru and Julius happily called a monolith. Perhaps that kind of thing is hidden in this room somewhere. While Volcanica is unreliable, it's a good idea to find the problem on your own. And so Emilia tries to investigate the room. It says that there are 6 pillars around the space and 1 huge pillar in the centre, which is what Volcanica is leaning against. And the size of the space is about 100 meters in radius. It feels like a much larger space than the other 2 layers, but the presence of the giant Volcanica has a part that upsets the sense of actual size. And we already saw in the last chapter that this layer is in the open air, which Emilia believes is in order to house the size of Volcanica, who's huge. So Emilia holds onto one of the pillars around the edge of the layer, and she looks down. She knows that Subaru and Ram should be fighting hard both in the tower and on the ground, but the thick clouds obstruct the view and it's impossible to see underneath. Emilia thinks about whether she could climb down or jump down, but she knows how high the clouds and sky are. Says maybe Reinhard could jump up to the clouds, but Emilia couldn't. It does, in this Google Translate version, sometimes switch to like first person when it's saying things that I think are Tappei's narration, which wouldn't normally be in first person, but they could also be Emilia's thoughts. It's kind of hard to tell. I think that's just a quirk of the translation. You know, it says like, I don't think my motor skills are bad, but Emilia knows how high the clouds and sky are. When I was little, I couldn't catch the clouds when I reached out. And when I wasn't small, I tried it and it was the same. I guess. And then she thinks that if there's nothing in the surrounding pillars, the most likely is the large pillar in the centre. Unlike the other 6, only its pillars extend even higher. Is there a place above the 0 layer that can be called the 0 layer? There seems to be a way to change this place where nothing changes. But as she gets closer to Volcanica, it just repeats the same line. She tries to ask Volcanica what to do. She says, Volcanica, what can I do for the test? And Volcanica predictably just repeats the same line. The answer from Volcanica remains the same. Emilia was more relieved than disappointed. If Volcanica's reaction doesn't change, she should be indifferent to this. Believing that, Emilia went around in the opposite direction of Volcanica and tried to find out the thick pillars. But when she touches the pillar, she hears the sound of wind, and instinctively creates an ice wall. And she realises that what happened was that Volcanica used its tail to strike a simple blow to Emilia. The dragon's tail is often used to express emotions in the relationship between Subaru and Patrash. When Subaru plays a prank, Ram or Patrash hits in a competitive manner. However, the blow of Volcanica's tail was not the ratio of such one-to-one affection. So Emilia's just using her familiarity with how Patrash, who's a ground dragon, behaves. Ground dragons, incidentally, were supposed to have been created by the great divine dragon, so they do have some similarities. But the way that Patrash uses her tail when she's playing with Subaru is completely different to what has just happened to Emilia here. For Volcanica, it's the same behaviour as wiping insects. It was like being a worm tossed at the feet of a giant creature. Understanding that fact, cold sweat traced Emilia's nape and spine. So now Emilia's reasoning that there must be something on that pillar because Volcanica had this reaction when she tried to touch it. Volcanica seems to have forgotten what to do. Even so, the fact that Shinryu stays here is proof that his spirit was so strong in his will to keep the promises he made before death. For Sage, Kensei and Shinryu, here we have Sage, Sword Saint and the Divine Dragon, to test their wisdom, power and ambition respectively. So Emilia thinks that she can't be half-hearted in this, she has to be serious because of what the dragon represents compared to what she thinks the Sage and Reid Astrea were put there to test about the people challenging the tower. And so we get to see Emilia use a new power that she hasn't used before, and this is one that we see she hasn't even told Subaru about, that she's been training by herself. And it's an evolved form of her ice brand arts, which we saw her use against Reid Astrea when she was creating all kinds of weapons out of ice. But in this case, she makes ice warriors. She makes 7 ice warriors in the shape of humans holding their respective weapons. Brave companions who challenge the dead with Emilia. I don't understand this line at all. She says, I'm going, Mr. Nebosuke. If you get up, be sure to get up early. I don't know if that's a reference to something or just some Google Translate thing, but if anybody knows who Mr. Nebosuke is and why she's saying if you get up early, be sure to get up early to her ice people that she's just made to fight Volcanica with, then please let me know in the comments. Still, it's really cool that Emilia's got this new skill. She can make these ice soldiers now, and it kind of makes you wonder where she's going to go with her ice abilities. She's still working to develop new techniques using them. I did see someone on Twitter saying it'd be really cool if Emilia ultimately ends up kind of being able to pilot like an ice mech. And I think, you know, if she teams up with Subaru, that's exactly the kind of thing he would come up with. So, you know, where he's been making up new spells using Beatrice, maybe there's something they'll do as a team effort that will involve something like that. And that would be pretty sweet. Although, you know, maybe with Tappei now having a fixation with old planes, maybe Emilia's going to make some kind of ice biplane with wings and fly around in that. Who knows? But anyway, this is all we get to see of Emilia and Volcanica in this chapter. I expect we'll be seeing more of this scene in the new chapters that are coming out today. But Volcanica just says the same line, and then it says, "That consciousness remains buried in the unchanging beyond of KO." Google Translate really seems to have problems with those kind of poetic lines that Tappei likes to put at the end of scenes, you know, as the kind of break into the next scene. I don't know what KO is or what this means, but we know that Emilia's trying to at least move Volcanica out of the way of that pillar. She's taking things seriously, and she's attacking with her new Icebrand art skill. And next we move on to the other scene of this chapter, which is Julius and Reid. Now, Reid's dialogue is done in quite a specific way that I got the impression from reading the proper translations of this from Witch Cult Translations and the couple of chapters Translation Chicken did, that it's quite hard to translate. People have been adding their own kind of flair to it. I think my favourite was, I can't remember which translator it was, but he decided to take the distinctive thing that Reid says quite often at the end of sentences and have him basically call everyone "you prick" at the end of every sentence, which I enjoyed, you know, but I am from London. Here, Google Translate is having a lot of issues with Reid's dialogue, but we get the feel of the way he's talking to Julius. It's basically the same as he always talks to everyone. He's kind of taunting and saying he's only using one chopstick and that Julius, you know, just can't keep up with him. Julius has just got his knight's sword and he's trying to fight. He's not being buffed by Subaru in this scene. Ram is the only one receiving Subaru's Corleonis, so Julius has to find his own way to find the strength to beat Reid, who he's fought several times in this arc already with no luck. But what we see Julius do is really cool. Now, as you must remember, Julius has had his name eaten, and that not only means that everybody else other than Subaru has forgotten about him, it also means that the quasi spirits that Julius uses as a spirits arts user have also kind of forgotten him. They still follow him around, the contract with them is still there, but they don't respond to him the way that they used to. They're very confused and kind of distressed by the situation, and it's been shown earlier in Arc 6 to be something that's quite depressing for Julius. But what he does here is he brings out all of his spirits and he breaks his contract with them. "I'm sorry, my buds. The lost bond made me feel uneasy for a long time. Not letting go of you. I'll release you from that neck tree now." I mean, we can get the feel of what he's trying to say to his little spirits, his buds, but the sentence doesn't really make a lot of sense, Google Translate wise. Followed by Julius's whisper, what is visualized as a faint light that shines in bright colours. It's the quasi-spirits of Julius Eucolius, beautiful spirits who insists on 6 attributes. What it means there is one for each of the magical types that exist in ReZero's world. It says it was an inseparable existence that was by the side of Julius before he became a knight. they too forgot Julius, whose name was robbed by the authority of eating. However, attracted by the indelible contract between the spirit and the contractor, and the power of Julius's innate protection of semen. Julius, according to Google Translate, has the protection of semen. What is the protection of semen? Let's just take a moment to appreciate that Google Translate thinks that Julius has the divine protection of semen. He continued to exist. Julius also refused to let go of them, believing that the relationship could be regained if his name was regained. How stupid it was. Everything has changed, so maybe he didn't want to change anything left. The buds who have been with me a lot before, I was so dear to you that I couldn't let go of my warmth. I was hoping that I could return to those days without incident. I'll give up such a weak, merciless, ugly me. As if confused, 6 quasi-spirits sway around Julius. Julius gently extended his arm towards them. Arms stretched like a perch, the quasi-spirits who saw them slowly gathered there. Then Julius smiled at the faint light that stopped on his arm. I was afraid to change, but there are things I can't get without being prepared to lose. For example, the flowering of a bud named love. What kind of petals will the buds that have been around for a long time bloom? The future to see with the eyes. They don't answer anything, but they seem to anticipate what was to come. My buds, let's free you guys. At the same time as the words, the quasi-spirits surrounding Julius's arm leave as if they were flipped. Even seemingly shocking, it was a bitter, lightning-like sensation that certainly pierced Julius and the quasi-spirits. Certain connections, bonds, and soul-to-soul contracts are broken. It's the pain and mourning of the loss only of a true soul-bound being that only a spiritualist can understand. And it then compares this to how Emilia felt when she broke her contract with Puck. Julius himself experiences parting with the 6 spirits at once, causing damage to his soul. A distorted sensation scratches his chest, and Julius tastes the exfoliation of his soul. It is a pain that's fundamentally different from when it was forgotten by the buds by the authority of gluttony. Not only Julius, but the quasi-spirits would have experienced the same pain and regretted it. He may have cursed the wounds on his soul, that he should not have made a contract with humans. And then he calls them back. He says, on top of that, let's call you guys again. I love you guys. If you accept this brilliant courtship, I'll sign it again. A new contract between me and you. Julius shouted loudly, stretching his arm down to heaven. Upon hearing the complaint, the quasi-spirits scattered as if they were flipped, quietly blinked for a second. Hesitation and crawling. It only took 1 second. Warm light wraps around the whole body of Julius Eucolius. It gently and lightly digs into the wounds of the soul that were carved by breaking the contract. And, it kind of poetically describes here, in a way that Google Translate can't really handle, the emotions of Julius and his quasi-spirits. Now that they're getting basically a clean slate, he can form a new contract with them as the person that he is now, rather than hoping that they will remember him once the world regains their memories of Julius, if that ever happens. And now he's in a position to move on, to have his spirits alongside him again and be able to use them in this fight against Reid. And it's just a really nice scene, and it's really cool. And in the end, he's sort of saying, that's right, my beautiful flowering maidens. In that one voice, there are 6 buds to answer. No, the answers of the maidens who bloom. Light was born. The pain of breaking the contract is healed by the bond that is reuniting. Wearing 6 more mysterious lights than ever, Julius Eucolius looked ahead. There is a figure of the apex that I longed for as a sword crusher. However, the envy of Julius Eucolius is a different place from the top. Therefore, there's no hesitation in opening up that longing with the light of a rainbow. And now he's sort of saying that he's ready to fight Reid Astrea as himself, as his true self for the first time. Shaking off the knight's sword, Julius grabbed the cloak and bowed gracefully. Then he raises his face and becomes the most admired thing in the world and calls himself, I'm the knight of the best, Julius Eucolius, the sword of the kingdom that slashes you. Now that's really the essence of what happens in the Julius scene, though I did miss a bit before he says goodbye to the spirits and then calls them back for a new contract, where Julius actually talks about his backstory to Reid a little bit. And he explains that his origin is that of the commoner. His parents died and his uncle's current father took over. Until then, he had nothing to do with the culture of aristocrats, therefore his way of being was created. Maybe my essence is probably a crude child who doesn't know his ideals when he's running around in the field wearing plain clothes instead of formal wear and laughing with his friends. I don't know etiquette, I have no ideals to aim for, and I try hard to live every day. That way of being as Julius must have been the future promised to me. However, the future was swept away by flash floods with his real parents and disappeared. That's why I pretend to be a knight. Let's stick to the appearance and contain our true self. And he talks about basically how he was ignorant of knightly ways until he met Reinhardt. And this is a backstory that we've already heard for Julius previously, but it's interesting that he's talking to Reid about this. It's kind of like he's going through this process of thinking about himself and who he wants to be, and he realizes what he needs to be able to defeat Reid. He's tried so many times just by being the knight that he's always kind of shown himself to be, but he's considering that maybe that isn't his true self, and so he realizes that he has to reform those contracts with his spirits, become the spirit arts user that he used to be, but with this new kind of awareness of his true self. And I guess in the next chapters we'll see just what Julius can do in that new form. But that's it for chapter 81. I'll hopefully be recording chapter 82 later tonight, so I look forward to seeing you again very soon for that. Otherwise, let me know in the comments what you think about this chapter, and, you know, just how hyped you are in general that we're finally getting new updates to the web novel. As always, please like and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. I will be making some videos about other things than the new Arc 6 chapters, but at the moment Tappei's working like a beast, so am I. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.